Abdullah, first of all, thank you very much for joining me today. That's brilliant news. And like all superhero stories, especially recently how they've been doing it in cinemas, they always go back to the origin story, yeah? Batman Begins. We all know the Batman story, and it goes back to how Bruce Wayne turned into Batman. Same with
Yeah,
Spider-Man. Now, my question for you is, how did you turn into the person you are today? Were you born into the Islamic faith? Were you always religious? And how did you decide to leave the religion?
right. So actually, there's two parts to my story. So I was born as an Ismaili Muslim. Ismailis are a small sect in Shia Islam, which are basically maybe 10 million in the world today. And later, and I wasn't very religious or practicing. My mom was Sunni, which is the mainstream Muslims, and my dad was Ismaili, but typically you go by what your dad goes by. So I was an Ismaili Muslim, and in high school, around the age of 18, I had some Sunni friends who encouraged me to read the Quran. So I read the Quran, and I'm like, okay, you know what, I this is a word of God. I was always taught that, and I want to follow God's word. And so I started reading it, and as I started reading it, I found that it was incompatible with Ismailism. Ismailism, you pray to this man, you give 1/8 of your charity to this man, sorry, of your wealth, of your income to this guy, Aga Khan. And so I was like, well, this doesn't quite add up because the Quran says you only pray to Allah. So then I became Sunni Muslim and I became really religious. So I started reading all the books of Hadith, which is what the Prophet said. And I read the Quran cover to cover multiple times. And I became very excited and motivated about my religion. I wasn't critical about it. I never looked into what the problems were with it, but because I had some familiarity with it, I kind of deep dived right into it. And so for the next pretty much, more than half of my life, I was a practicing religious Sunni Muslim, and I believed in it very strongly. So, some of the things I did was I would pray 5 times a day. So that meant like, even at the office, I would have to pray because 5 times, it always coincides with work at least once or twice. So I'd have to go and get like, a little room and I'd have to go and say my prayers over there. And, it was kind of awkward and embarrassing and, uncomfortable at times, but I did it because I'm like, okay, well, God wants me to do this, so I have to do this, right? In Ramadan every year, I would fast the entire month, no matter, everybody else is eating around you here in Canada, still you got to do what you got to do. So I did all that. And then, now this is a part that, where everything changed. 3 years ago, what happened was I was having an online discussion with someone, and he said that he pretty much was going to become Muslim, but then when he looked into it, he found out that the stories in the Quran were actually ripped off from ancient Jewish myths. So I was like, hold on a minute. That doesn't make any sense. Yes, the stories are the same as the Jewish stories because they all come from the same God. But those are not made up. Those are actually coming from God, right? And he's like, okay, well, look into it, right? So I started looking into it and I was like, whoa, this is troubling. Like the stories in the Quran, they're not coming from like the revealed, book, which is considered the Torah, but they're coming from the Talmud, which is, the stories of the Jewish rabbis. And they had a lot of stories they used to make up in order to teach lessons, right? Like to teach about like Cain and Abel, or the story of Khidr and Moses, which is, it actually comes from a similar story in the Talmud. So these are not considered like, stories that Moses got from God, but these are just like, lessons. So then this actually caused me a lot of doubt. And then I started reading all of the polemics against Islam because I'd never done that before. You see, I jumped deep dived into the religion, but I never looked into the arguments against it. So now that I started to look at the arguments against it, I was like, whoa, this is interesting. Like, what if this is true? Like my whole life I've been following this thing, thinking it's true. I invested a lot of energy into this and a lot of time and money. And what if it's not true? Like, it's a scary thought. It's a scary thought for any believer that and then, when you get to that point as a believer, you now have a choice. Do you look into it and do you face your doubts, or do you kind of like just ignore it, right? because it's scary, right? So then I'm like, you know what? And what I did, I took the chicken way out, and I said, you know what? I believe in God and I believe in this religion and I believe in Allah and Muhammad wasn't a liar, this and that. So I'm just gonna block all this. So for 1 full year after that, I stayed as a Muslim and I didn't let it get to me. And my friends told me I made the right decision, and just let go of your doubts and this and that. But 1 year later, so this is now in 2015, in July, all my doubts came flooding back to me when I was at the mosque and there was this sheikh, this scholar, and he was going on about the Quran says that Allah holds up the sky without any pillars that you can see, right? And then I was like, oh my God, this sounds awfully wrong because there's no need for pillars to hold up the sky, right? And it's clear from other verses in the Quran that the sky means basically space, right? Like because it says that he beautified, the sky with stars. So we know what he's talking about. It's not the atmosphere. Some Muslims try to say it means the atmosphere. So then I was like, this was really bothering me. So this is the state of a believer that has cognitive dissonance. A person that on one hand it's like this is true, and on the other hand something else is also true, and they're both conflicting. So it causes it's called cognitive dissonance. So you don't know what to do, right? And you're like, well, I have to resolve this, and the only way to resolve it is one of the two things which you think is true has to go, right? It has to give, because they both can't be true when they contradict each other. So then I started. Then I actually, at this point, I now had the courage to look into it, fully, because it was just too painful to believe in this and also believe in science as the way, like not just like doubtful science, but like certain science that we clearly know we're a planet in space, right? So, and there's nothing to hold up, right? It's just sounds like something someone would have made up. So then at this point, I started to look into it even more deeply. And that's when I finally decided that, okay, this can't be true. And then I started to post publicly. And then I started to engage people like my Muslim friends. And that's when I left Islam. So this was 2 years ago.
Wow. How was that reaction when you started engaging your Muslim friends? How did they receive your change in views?
Okay. So one thing I kind of regret is I didn't have a chance to talk to some of my family members privately before I did this.
Hmm.
Like my brother. My brother's a very religious Muslim. And so what happened was I started posting on Facebook. But I started off not saying that Islam is false and it's garbage and it's not a true religion, but I started off by saying these are the things I'm reading, and these things to me make a lot of sense. Like I posted this article, if you Google Quran Spotlight, it's called like Greek Galenic medicine and similarity to the Quran or something like that. So this was an amazing article. It was a long article that went into depth as to how the science in the Quran and Sunnah, meaning the sayings of Prophet Muhammad and the Quran, which is considered the revealed book of God, how the science and the wording completely mirrors 7th century Greek Galenic medicine. Like to me, someone that believed that the Quran was the inspired, true, verbatim word of God, why would it need to mirror 7th century science? I'm saying like that's again trouble. And to me, this blew me away because everything I thought was true turned out it was just kind of debunked. Right? I mean, there was an answer to all of these claims. There was an answer to the fact that people used to say that the embryology in the Quran is a miracle. It's not a miracle, right? It doesn't mention the female egg. The Quran never mentions a female egg. The Quran never mentions even sperm. It mentions seminal fluid, which of course everybody knew about. And so, I started posting these things, and Muslims were like, well, they started off with like, whoa, what's going on with this guy? One guy messaged me and he said, are you doing a social experiment? Like, why are you posting this stuff, right? And then then people realized that, oh my God, he's serious. He's actually having doubts about all these things, right? And they was shocked because, when you convert to Islam, so I converted like I told you from Ismailism to Sunni Islam.
Can you just hold on there 1 second? You say converted, whereas for me, I would say Shiite Muslims or Shia Muslims and also Sunni Muslims. They're all Muslims. They all follow Islam. But you saying you
Right,
converted to Islam from being a Shiite Muslim. So can you just explain that a little bit
right,
more,
right.
please?
Right. So yeah, I tend to say that, and I apologize to any Ismailis who get offended because I used to believe as a Sunni Muslim that Ismailis were not Muslim, not Shias. So Shias are what you call 12er Shias, the majority, the Ithna Shalis. They are the majority of Shias, and they follow, you can say, a religion very close to Sunni Islam in the sense that they both pray, the same prayer. They do the fasting thing in Ramadan. They don't believe in this man that kind of tells them what to do, and they don't give, like I was telling you in Ismailism, it's very, very different. It's so different that you wouldn't recognize most Ismailis as Muslims. Like I was saying, the women, they don't wear the hijab. They don't believe in hijab. They don't pay the zakat that the Quran talks about, 2.5% of your wealth that you give to charity. The mosques that they have, they don't call them mosques, they call them Jamaat Khanas. It's complete, the prayer is not, they don't read from the Quran for the prayer. They have a prayer that Aga Khan, the leader of the Ismailis, made up. So I used to consider it like a different religion because it was so different from Islam, right? Like they basically followed this man, and he is kind of like a pope, you could say, right?
Okay, who was this man? What was his name?
His name is Shah Karim Al Husseini. If you just Google Aga Khan, you'll see pictures of his title is Aga Khan, which means or the Aga Khan, which means the King of Kings. That's what they call him.
Okay.
And his name is Shah Karim Al Husseini. So he's the leader of the Ismailis. He does a lot of charity work and a lot of good things. He's known very well all over the world for his, like he builds a bunch of hospitals and schools, and that's basically what he's known for. And he's a leader, like I said, he's a leader of the Ismailis. Him and Justin Trudeau, they meet all the time, and Justin Trudeau even went to his private island once, and there was a lot of controversy about that. But anyways, so that's why I say converted, because to me it was like a complete change. It was a 180-degree shift. Ismailis are very well integrated in the community because they don't follow so rigidly like most Sunni and even Shia Muslims, right? So that's why I use the word converted.
Would you also say with the Ishmaelis that they would not talk about so much the kuffar, the non-believer, the disbeliever? Was
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that was less prevalent in your original
Yes.
faith.
Yes, Ismailis are very well integrated. Aga Khan, or the leader, talks about, kind of like being well educated, and there's no talk about heaven and hell. I've never ever heard him mention heaven or hell. So it's more like, being a good member of society. He still wants you to go to the mosque and, say your prayers and be spiritual, but it's a very, in a sense, watered down version of Islam, if I could say that. I know Ismailis won't like me saying that, but like, the original teachings are very different.
Well, it sounds like pardon my lack of, using big words here. It sounds like a nice version of Islam, the Ishmaeli one.
Yes.
So what was appealing for you to convert from that form of Islam, even though you consider it as a different religion, to the Sunni version?
Yes.
Did you feel some peer pressure from your Sunni friends?
No, no,
How
no,
did
no,
they used
no.
to treat you?
No, not because of that. No, 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 not because of that. It was because when I read the Quran, see the biggest thing that the biggest problem is I got to the verse in the Quran that says anyone that worships other than Allah will go to hell forever,
Hmm.
and He'll never forgive them. So in the Quran it says you have to only worship Allah,
Yeah.
and you can only pray to Allah. But Ismailis, they pray directly to Aga Khan. So they basically ask him. They say, "Oh, please forgive me," and he's considered like an intercessor. So the actual religion of Ismailism goes directly against the Quran and the main message of the Quran, right? Like, so that was my problem. So I'm like, hey, I don't want to go to hell. I'm Muslim, but I'm like following this thing that I'm actually doing something that God hates, right? And I couldn't see the connection because of what the Quran is teaching and what Aga Khan is teaching. They're completely different, right? So that's why I had to. That was where the pressure came from to convert
Did
because
you
it didn't.
sincerely feel then that there was a chance that you were practicing the wrong religion and that you would spend
Yes,
eternity in the hellfire?
yeah, that's exactly what I felt because when I went to talk to my dad, I'm like, I'm reading the Quran and I'm seeing this, and I'm like, how does this match with what we're doing as Ismailis, right? And he's like, yeah, that's what Sunnis say, that we're doing this. I was like, you got to be kidding me. Like, we're doing the very thing that, we're not, that God never forgives. So I'm like, oh my God, I can't follow this anymore, right? Like, I don't want to. Eventually, I didn't even realize I converted, because what happened was I was doing all the Sunni things, but I didn't realize that I'd converted until many years later. I'm like, you know what? I don't want to be Ismaili anymore. I'm not even following the Ismaili stuff. I'm just basically going by the Quran. So that's when I realized that I'm actually a Sunni Muslim, and then I kind of officially converted. But all along, I was, for a period of time, I was doing both. I was doing the Ismaili stuff and the Sunni stuff.
Okay, so you say officially converted. How did you go about that?
Yeah, so for the longest time, I was pretty much a Sunni Muslim, but it was only one day that I told my friends, I'm like, hey, I never did this official conversion thing, and they're like, yeah, well, all you have to do is you just have to say the declaration of faith,
The
which
Shahada.
is saying, yeah, the Shahada. Oh yeah, yeah, exactly, the Shahada, which I'm saying every day in my prayer, anyways. And you just need to basically take a bath, which I've done like 1,000 times already since I, converted. So the only time was a couple of years after that. One of the imams, he told me, why don't you just officially convert in front of everybody?
Mm.
And I'm like, yeah, but I've been a Muslim for like so many years. He's like, yeah, but it'll be a good show for everybody. So I'm like, okay, okay, fine. Let's help people to get motivated, because people, like I said, you become a trophy. You become a trophy when you're a convert. You become kind of a trophy, and you're kind of paraded around in the community, right? Like, oh, look at this guy, Abdullah. He's such a good guy. He converted, unlike us sinners. We don't take Islam seriously. We take Islam for granted. But look at this wonderful man. He chose the religion. So you become like a kind of trophy convert, right, in the
Yeah, for sure.
community.
Do you
And
consider yourself
people,
a, pardon me, do you consider yourself a convert or a revert?
yeah, the two terms, I always use them interchangeably. Convert or revert, they technically mean the same thing. People try to use revert to say that, yeah, everyone's born Muslim in the first place, but I use the two terms. I usually just use the word convert, but some people use the revert.
Yeah.
I consider them the same.
Okay. And you were saying that's because in the ideology of Islam, everyone's born a Muslim, yeah?
Yeah,
So if you then
yeah,
find Islam
exactly.
later on in your life, you're returning to your original
Yeah,
place. So yeah, that's where the origins
exactly.
of the term revert comes from.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you said they were going to make a big show of you converting to Sunni Muslim. So what was that like? What was that day like?
So that was just all of a sudden out of the blue. I was just going to the mosque for Friday prayers, and I happened to be going with the imam because I got to know him, and he was giving me a ride from work. And then he said, "Why don't we do this thing?" I'm like, "Yeah, okay, cool, fine, let's do it." Like, I like helping the faith however I can. So we came and we did it, and he said, "This guy, he's been Muslim for a long time, but he converted, right?" And now check out the story, what happened, right? And everyone's like, and he's like, guys, after the prayer, everyone come and give him a hug. And so everybody gave me a hug, and then he's like, guys, can someone please give this brother Abdullah a ride back to the office? He doesn't have a car, and he took a taxi. Sometimes he takes a taxi because he really loves to pray, but it's difficult for him because he's just a young guy in university. And can someone please volunteer to give him a ride back to work? And it was like silence. Nobody offered me a ride. After they all gave me hugs, not one person offered me a ride. And then the imam's like, okay, I'll drive you back to the office.
No way. Okay, so
I was
fair enough.
like, wow.
Yeah.
Nice one. Nice job, Muslim community, welcoming someone to the faith. Yeah, so that was that story.
Okay. Now, did you find that you got a little bit more integrated into community as time passed? Were they slightly less apprehensive of you as they got more familiar with you being present?
So you mean when I converted to Sunnism?
Yeah, when you with the Sunni Muslim, like you say, when you said the Shahada and then the Imam said, "Who's
No,
going to
I
give
was
this guy?"
always so even like, so I think my friends had kind of figured even long, long before that I was a Sunni Muslim, because they didn't care that I called myself Ismaili. They were just happy that I was going to the mosque with them, and they were inviting me to the Islamic events, conferences, and that's how I became more and more religious, because and then my friend told me, you should pray 5 times a day, and so I started praying 5 times a day, and it just felt like more correct, right? So no one was apprehensive about me. They were really happy that I was doing all this stuff, right? And I was like I said, I was accepted eventually, I was a bona fide Muslim, right? Sunni Muslim. So there wasn't any issue. And anyways, even Ismailis, they don't have problems. for the most part with the Ismailis here in Canada. People are good friends with each other. I know in Pakistan and stuff, there's a bit of like heat between the different sects,
Mm.
but in Canada, you don't feel that. Everyone's just good friends.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. So the whole Canadians have got this. What's the right word here? You know, everyone thinks that Canadians are absolutely lovely. Every single one of them. That's how they're viewed. And you're saying that's also true of the Islamic community in Canada as well. They're more
Um,
accepting and smiley. Yeah,
well,
go on.
I guess in general, and we can talk about that when I tell you what happened when I left Islam and how the community reacted. For the most part, yeah, that's what happened. So just to finish the story, what happened was people online were like, then they started telling me you should stop posting this stuff online. Like first they were like tolerant of me asking questions online, and then people started telling me, listen, this is not the right way to ask questions. You need to go talk to a sheikh. And I said, I'm not asking questions.
Well, Abdullah, can I just stop you there 1 second? I feel that we just jumped forward a little bit. So, like, you were converted to Sunni Islam. How long were you practicing Sunni Islam for before
Oh,
you
right.
started questioning it?
15 years.
15 years. Okay.
Yeah. So from the age of around 18 to about the age of like 31 or so.
Okay. Now, I asked you before when you were first, brought up with not in Islam, Ismaili, the whole concept of a disbeliever, the kuffar. You never came across it, people burning in the hellfire. Now, with those 15 years you were practicing as a Sunni Muslim, how much did you hear about the disbeliever, the kuffar, and what will happen to them if they do not convert to
Oh,
Islam? Did
yeah.
that become more prevalent?
Yes, yes, very much so. As a Sunni Muslim, I mean, the religion is all about heaven and hell. It's all about, you have to do these things or you'll go to hell. You have to tell people about Islam or they'll go to hell. Every non-Muslim, who God judges to have received the message properly and they didn't accept it will all go to hell.
Hmm. Great. So, did you feel motivated then to make videos to try and get people to embrace Islam? Did you do anything along those lines?
Yes, exactly. I was motivated, and so I created, not just motivated to help people convert to Islam, but motivated to help Muslims to learn more about Islam as
Okay.
well. And at the time, there was a big lack in the community. There wasn't any Islamic websites. There was only a couple actually. There was one or two. One of them was called Islamicity, and they used to have online streaming video, but you had to pay money for it. And I was like, come on, this is ridiculous. Like, we need to help the community. So I started my own website, lightuponlight.com. And that was a website where I told people that, you know what, I'm going to make it free of charge. I don't care how much it costs. I don't care how I got to do this. And I had friends telling me, there's no way you're going to be able to do this. It's going to be expensive. Like, how are you going to? Because this is way before YouTube. This was back in like 2001, and video streaming is expensive. And I'm like, I don't care. I'm going to make this. And I was in university at the time. So I'm like, I'm going to make this happen. So I started the website and I started uploading videos. It was a challenge to find videos because most people wouldn't let me put the videos online. And I wanted to do everything legit. But, eventually I started videotaping my own lectures. I would go to conferences. I would get permission. I would record the videos myself. I would edit them. And then I would also go to some Islamic stores. I would try to get some VHS videos. I would try to get, it was my mission that I wanted to put the stuff online so people could watch. So I did that for many years as well. I never made any videos of myself because I didn't consider that I had anything worthy to say. And plus, my job was using my technical skills and my know-how to get that stuff online. And the website was a success. Like up till like I stopped maintaining it when YouTube became popular because at that point I was like, well, there's lots of alternatives now, and I don't need to spend time on this anymore. And but by the time the website has kind of like declined, it had over 4 million downloads
Wow.
in over those like from between 2001 and whenever I kind of stopped maintaining it.
That's pretty significant numbers. Were you happy with the amount of people you reached?
Yeah, and on top of that, the funny thing is, I even met someone at my office that told me, actually, not just at my office, I hear from people all the time that your website helped me to become more religious. Or, like, I haven't heard from anyone that said I converted to Islam because of it, but like a lot of Muslims told me that, it helped them to come back to the faith, or it helped them to, like a bunch of people I know. So and online too, I hear that all the time. So I guess it did the job it was supposed to do.
Yeah. How did that make you feel?
Yeah, I was happy. Like I said, I was just doing my duty as a good Muslim and as someone that cared about humanity. Right? I cared about humanity, and I wanted them to know the message of Islam because I felt that it was good for the world because it came from God. Even though some of the things in Islam at the time, even then, I felt like I don't understand the reason for this, and this doesn't make sense. But I'm like, come on, if it's from God, an all-knowing God, then He knows best. So I can just ignore those things that don't really make sense, and I can continue to preach this message, right?
Yeah, for sure. Now, if you were preaching, you obviously knew the scriptures pretty well. Were there any parts of it that you came across that you thought, "Oh, I don't like that," but because you were, a God-fearing man, and you were a Muslim, a Sunni Muslim, you refused to take it on board too much. You kind of came across some parts that you didn't like and were dismissive of them. Was that the
Yeah.
case?
No, you know what? A lot of people leave Islam because of the moral issues in Islam, stoning adulterers and lashing, all those things, right? Like killing apostates and homosexuality, like being a crime and all that. I never looked into those things in great detail, and they never came up in my life,
Yeah.
like those type of issues, because living in Canada, you don't even necessarily think about those things, and it wasn't like I was engaged in polemics with non-Muslims about these things. And I think maybe once or twice someone asked me about why people are killed. And, I looked up some website and, it had some sort of answer as to like, maybe it said we don't do it, or maybe it said we don't do it in this context, or, maybe it justified it somehow. Majority of Muslims will justify killing apostates under like the treason law, how treason works, which I find is a ridiculous comparison. But anyways, without getting into that too much, no, it never affected me. I didn't think about those things. I just accepted it's from God, and even if I don't like it, I mean, I have to accept it. Like that's how I used to justify that homosexuality was wrong,
Mm.
even though I kind of felt like those guys don't have a choice, and the majority of them don't choose to be homosexual. They're just born that way. I felt like, well, they're just gonna have to be miserable the whole life and be single because that's what God wants from them. Like it didn't make sense, but I accepted it, right? And I'm like, well, if God, that's what God wants, and that's what God wants, that's the test or whatever, right?
Yeah, makes sense. It does make sense. So then, after your 15 years of practicing Islam, preaching it as well, when did doubt start creeping into your mind?
Yeah, so that's the first time was when I had that online dialogue with a friend of a friend, who just happened to make a comment saying Islam was copied. And sometimes people think that discussing with people doesn't have an impact. Clearly, there are people that are open-minded that will be reached by your dialogues, by your efforts that you make. So this guy reached me, right? And that goes back to the whole thing of how, like I said, how that initiated the whole thing. Then I became Muslim again for one full year. Then 2 years ago in 2015, that's when the whole house of cards came falling down. When I started to look into it with courage, in great detail, and then that's when I started posting online.
Yeah. How did you start looking into it in great detail? How did you go about that? Were you reading the same text you always read, or were you, watching videos or hearing talks from people who are
Right.
critical of Islam?
Yeah, I'm not too much of a video guy. I prefer like reading content because I find it goes into more detail, and videos can kind of be misleading sometimes. So I wasn't into videos, but what I did was I started reading. I looked up any criticism of Islam I could find. So Answering Islam, like I told you, that Quran Spotlight website was amazing. The whole thing, how it debunks the science regarding embryology,
Mm.
and also the story of Dhul Qarnayn, which is basically Alexander the Great. The Alexander the Great story, I even bought a book on Alexander the Great. There's so much material on it.
Mm.
This was before the Masked Arab. So the Masked Arab has made videos on these topics which are easy to digest and understand and get to the point. But this was before his time, and he wasn't popular. I didn't know about him. So I bought a book on Alexander the Great, and I found and I read everything I could. And the conclusion I came up to was, this is a copy of the Syriac Alexander romance. There's no way around it. It just makes, there's no other explanation for it other than the fact that the story of Surah Kaf, the story of the cave, the chapter of the cave, it's a complete ripoff. And to be honest, when I figured this out, like I felt like wow, like I can't believe it. Like, and I was actually happy to find out that like I wasn't following the truth. It wasn't like, some people actually go into depression, some people get like anxiety, and I have a friend that, it's been like maybe a year or 2 years where he's kind of left Islam. He pretty much left Islam, you could say. He doesn't believe in it, but he still fears hell. And I hear that from many people. Like, but for me, it wasn't like that. It was like okay, I thought I was following the truth, but I'd had these uncomfortable feelings in my mind that were kind of building up, and now I know I wasn't following the truth, so I don't have to follow this thing anymore, right? And I was excited for my new life. I was excited that, okay, well, this is interesting. Then how is this going to affect my life now, right? So because Islam is, if you follow it fully, it's not easy, right? Like, you make a lot of sacrifices, right? It comes with a very, very high cost. So, and I was one of those people that was following it, completely as much as I could, right? So when I now that I found out that it wasn't true, well, it means that I can actually be myself now. I don't have to say that, homosexuals are bad, and
For sure. You can actually buy a house now as well, huh? You can get a
Mm,
mortgage.
exactly. So one of the things that I hadn't been doing all along, and I guess you're quite familiar with these topics. This is great. Interest is considered riba or usury, so it's forbidden in Islam. So I could never buy a house. So all along, I was renting, and the rent prices were going up and up and up and up. And I had a big family. I had 5 kids, so it puts you in a difficult position because it's hard to rent with a big family. The prices are like going higher and higher. And you don't basically get anywhere, right? Like, if you're renting, you can't build up any capital. You have to basically save cash on the side, which you don't get the preferential tax treatment, and basically it just doesn't make sense. Like, there's no reason not to buy a house. Nobody's getting hurt. The bank's not getting hurt. The buyer's not getting hurt. It's a beneficial transaction to both parties. Yet you can't do it because you're a Muslim. So yeah, I managed to buy a house for the first time. I'm no longer restricted to eating halal food. It's just, yeah, my life got actually much better now that I left Islam. I'm just much better off.
I bet. Now, how long was that transition to being a Muslim to? Would you now consider yourself an atheist?
Yeah. So it wasn't a very long transition for me. So I started posting that stuff online, like I told you. People started getting angry at me and saying, you should ask a sheikh, you shouldn't be posting this stuff online. Are you doing a social experiment? But the community, for the most part, they were tolerant of me. They just got mad, but nobody threatened me. Nobody said they're going to kill me, anything like that. For the most part, people were just deeply, deeply sad because they knew me and they knew I was sincere in what I was saying. That like, and they saw me being this religious dude that they looked up to, because they used to say like, this guy is the type of guy I want to be one day. I'm not religious, but I want to be like this guy. And then I completely fell off the boat, right? And I fell off the fence, or whatever you want to call it. So then people were like really sad, right? A couple of people got angry and blocked me, but for the most part, they were kind of tolerant. They offered to speak with me. They told me, let's go talk to this imam, which I did. I talked to a bunch of people, which didn't help. But then after that, like, yeah, I consider myself atheist now. It wasn't a long transition. It was maybe a couple of weeks where
Oh,
I
wow.
was like deeply, deeply, deeply looking to this. I didn't consider myself exactly non-Muslim until, you know, after I had discussed with multiple people, and every time I was discussing with people, it was like we weren't getting anywhere. They weren't able to resolve these issues because there is no resolution for these issues because Islam is false, right? So, I finally found out that the thing I was following was not true. So there was no way back, right? Like, once I found out it was true, once these points were clear in my mind, I'm like, yeah, I'm not Muslim anymore. And at that time, I wasn't calling myself atheist. I was just like, yeah, I'm not Muslim. But like, as time went by and I researched more, and I even gave Christianity a chance, and I looked into that as well, and I felt like it suffers from the same problems that Islam suffers from, many of the same problems. So I'm like, I don't want to be Christian. And then I decided to read some books and do some research, and as time went by, I felt more and more comfortable to call myself atheist.
Yeah, for sure. Now, apostasy in Islam, it's punished by death, but You know, that's only in a select few countries. Realistically, around the world, that very rarely happens. But the social isolation that comes as a result of leaving Islam, that is it's a real problem. Now, you were saying your
Yes.
brother had an issue with you leaving the religion. How did your family find you becoming an atheist and apostate, leaving Islam?
So my brother decided, he just based on his personality, he didn't want to talk about it and he didn't want to talk to me about it.
Pardon me, just quickly, older or younger brother?
Just one younger brother that I have.
Okay.
So he completely, kind of shut down the conversation and he said, I don't want to discuss it. I don't want to talk about it ever again. And that was just the end of it. My dad was Ismaili and he was very liberal, like I told you. He was okay with me becoming Sunni in the first place.
Hmm.
And so he was like, when I told him, he was like, yeah, that's cool, whatever you like, whatever you believe. I mean, he believed in God, but he was very, very, very easygoing with like religious values.
Yeah.
And my mom as well is pretty easygoing, and she said, you should believe in God, but it's your choice, and she had no problem with it, just like my dad. Both my parents were very easygoing. Most of my family, and I'm very thankful for that. Like my family is very liberal. They don't shun me, other than my brother, like I said, and he just doesn't want to talk about that, but he still talks to me in general. But I didn't have a problem becoming Muslim or leaving Islam, and I'm very thankful for that. Most people I know don't have that privilege,
Yeah.
and they're not able to leave Islam openly, which is why I want to do this and why I'm motivated to speak about this, because other people don't have this opportunity. They risk losing the everything, right? Like in my case, I did have a risk to lose my wife. I didn't know how she was going to take it when I told her that I don't believe in this stuff anymore. So I had to tread very carefully, because you don't know, what effects the religion will have on the mind of a believer. And in Islam, a Muslim woman is not allowed to be married to a Muslim man, a non-Muslim man.
Hmm.
So there was a risk of that. But thankfully she didn't leave me either, which is I'm happy to
Can you just
happy to say.
elaborate on that a little bit? It was something I wanted to ask you, and you brought it up voluntarily. But how did your wife react? Does she still follow Islam? Is she religious? And also her family as well. That must have played a big role in her decision.
So my wife is a convert. She's a white convert to Islam. She became Muslim like 1 year before meeting me. And so her family is not Muslim.
Okay.
Her family is Pentecost and Catholic. And when they found out that I left Islam, they were actually happy
Yeah, I bet.
because
Doing a little dance. Woohoo!
they were happy because they saw that even the grandkids now they can go for Halloween. They saw that we can buy a house. They saw that I can listen to music now. I don't have an issue with music because I was Salafi and I was strict against music as well. We didn't listen to any music. So they saw us becoming more normal, right? So they were quite happy. My in-laws were happy.
Yeah.
My wife saw me that she saw that I was a sincere believing Muslim, and I just lost my faith. And she saw that. She saw the process, right? And so you cannot be in a situation like this and it doesn't affect your faith. It's just impossible. If you have a brain and you see someone that's so close to you losing their faith and trying their best to stay a believer, and they cannot stay a believer, because I don't believe anybody chooses no, you can't choose what you believe. You either believe or you don't believe, right? Like either it's true or you can't just choose to believe. So she saw me going through this process, losing faith, and so it affected her as well, right? Like she decided to remain as a Muslim, but clearly she's nowhere near as religious as she was before. And I'm hoping that one day she'll just officially leave Islam. But for all intents and purposes, you can say she's a Muslim. Like not as practicing, and she prefers I don't really go into details of all that.
Of
But
course.
you can say that she's still a Muslim. You could say.
Now, if you don't mind me asking, what about your children? You were saying before you sent them to Islamic school. Do they still attend Islamic school?
Yeah, I did send him to Islamic school, which was I think I must have paid like over 20, maybe $20,000 for Islamic school
Wow.
over the life of my kids. And near the end, before I left Islam, I was against. I wanted to put them in public school because I felt like the quality of the teaching, the quality of the school wasn't that great.
Hmm.
And I felt this public schools were actually doing a better job, and I wanted to put them back in public school. My wife still wanted to keep them in Islamic school, and so I said, okay, fine, we'll keep them in Islamic school. That's what you want. You want. And she wanted the best for them as well. She wanted them to be like good Muslims or whatever. Eventually, I took them out of Islamic, especially after I left Islam. she kind of had no argument with me because then she started to have doubts herself.
Yeah.
So we took them out of Islamic school, and I have a video, by the way, where I interview my wife, and it's called like Shirl's apostasy. Sorry, Shirl's husband's apostasy and her conversion to Islam or something like that on my channel. So in that interview, I explained that for my kids, and she actually agreed with me that we will teach them, how to discern right from wrong. We'll teach them to be skeptical and to follow what they believe is the truth, and we'll teach them about Islam, and we'll teach them so they'll get to decide for themselves what they want to follow. To be honest, they're not going to end up. I highly doubt they're going to end up Muslim. My oldest son, he's 13 now, and I'm pretty sure he's not going to end up Muslim because he saw the same thing and he's old enough to understand what happened to me.
Yeah.
My 11-year-old son as well is kind of old enough to understand that I lost the faith. The younger kids, they don't really get what's going on, and so I don't think any of them will end up Muslim. But by technically they're Muslim by name, and we'll see as they get older what happens.
Yeah. Okay, good stuff. But they're not eating halal food, anything on those lines. So living a traditional Canadian life, yeah.
Yeah, like I I pretty much just take them out to McDonald's and stuff now, and yeah, exactly.
Okay, nice. Now, what was the best part of leaving Islam then? Where you said music before a little bit jovially, so you can bop your head to some beats now. You can eat some bacon. What were the parts that you most enjoyed embracing, and what were parts that even though it's not motivated by religious actions, you still kept part of your person?
Yeah, so the one thing I mentioned as an example is I still wash my butt with water.
Nice.
That was a good practice that it's hard to once you go water, you can't go back to dry tissue. It's just not the same.
Cool.
That's one thing. In terms of leaving Islam, like I don't tend to emphasize those things because it's when you leave Islam, immediately people say, "Oh, you left Islam because you want to drink. Oh, you left Islam because you want to fornicate," and it's a typical straw man that people throw at you, right?
Yeah.
So I don't tend to emphasize like what I enjoyed, but like I would say the biggest thing is not having the mental cognitive dissonance anymore,
Yeah.
believing in a world that makes sense now, like everything makes sense. I'm so excited about learning more about science. One of the things that hurt me and led me to accept Islam was I wasn't scientifically literate.
Mm.
I didn't have a background in science. I didn't study much science, so that actually hurt me, and that allowed me to be fooled, right, by some of the things in the Quran. And so when I started to study, now that I'm studying, I'm studying philosophy, so I don't have to worry about being misguided. I don't have to think, is this something bad I can't read or I can't listen to? You know what I mean? As a Muslim, you're always worried that, you're going to read something that's going to make you lose your faith. So you kind of try to stay away from that. Or you feel like, Satan is going to misguide you or something. So, having an open mind now, being able to read everything and not worry about whether it conflicts with something that had to follow, that's a huge burden off your back. The whole idea of hell and not having to feel hell anymore is a huge, huge, huge weight off my back. Like honestly, it's just a huge relief. I can just have a happy life now without feeling every little thing I do that's gonna make me go to hell. You know what I'm saying? Like you said, eating bacon. I've tried bacon. The thing is, after a whole lifetime, even as an Ismaili, I didn't eat that stuff because they don't tend to drink or eat pork. I can't do it. Like I eat bacon, but like I feel disgusted. It's just completely irrational.
Yeah, there you
This
go. Okay, fair enough. You haven't programmed that part out of you yet. So
I
it's
can't.
like, no, 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 pigs, it's swine. You're rolling muck and you're dirty things. So I can understand that.
It's like what I tell people. It's like if I told you why don't you have some crickets or something, right? Like like some food that some people might eat in a different part of the world,
Mm.
or like in China they have some very strange foods that they have like that some of them are still moving and stuff, right? It's like that type of diet. It's like that to me. Like pork is like ugh,
I bet, mate.
disgusting.
I bet. Unfortunately, I heard someone talk about the future of humans and food, and they're saying that crickets, locusts, all that
Yeah.
kind of stuff, that's going to be the future of the human diet. So, fortunately for you and I, we've still got the pizzas, the burgers, the steaks, all that's available. But in like 1,000 years' time, they're going to be eating some horrible worms. So, yeah, we'll leave that to them. But look,
Yeah.
you're a Canadian, yeah, and the leader of your country is the king of the left, Mr. Justin Trudeau.
Yes.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I'm pretty sure Canada just passed a motion in Parliament, something to do with Islamophobia. If you're criticizing Islam there, and you can get it in trouble by the law. Do you know much about this?
Yes, 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 yes. I know about this. So what happened was there was a killing in one of the mosques in Canada. Some guy went in the mosque and shot some people, and I believe some people actually died. So what happened was one of the Muslim MPs, members of parliament, decided to make a motion to condemn Islamophobia. Now, the thing is, what most people don't understand is it wasn't a law, it was a motion. And a motion is just simply just like a statement they're making, kind of to make a point. And the point was to condemn Islamophobia. Now, I hate that word, Islamophobia. I absolutely hate it. And I wish they would have used the word anti-Muslim bigotry, because that's the whole point of that motion, was that to kind of condemn, because what happened was there's a couple of things that happened. That was one case. The other case was there was a guy that was making leaflets, and he was targeting. He was kind of making people that wanting. He was targeting certain Muslims or something, or he was telling people that they should. So basically, there's a fine line, right, between criticizing the religion and actually, you know, calling on people to attack people or something like that, right? So as far as I know, the ex-Muslim community that I'm a part of EXMNA, Ex-Muslims of North America, which I recommend anyone that's left Islam, you know, look into it, join it, go through the screening process. It's a wonderful organization. It's very safe. You know, we have actual meetups. I haven't actually had a chance to go to a meetup, unfortunately, but we have actual meetups in real life with other, you know, other people that have left the faith. So the people that I know in EXMNA are not worried about this motion. Nobody, as far as I know, is considered it like a threat to free speech or anything like that. For the most part, and it hasn't affected me because I was worried too. I'm like, well, my entire website could be considered Islamophobia because I'm like saying Islam is garbage, Islam is hateful, you know, Islam is dangerous, Islam is false. So am I committing Islamophobia? Like, am I going to go to jail for this? Am I going to be fined for this? I hope not, because you know, I'm not saying anything hateful to anybody. I'm just saying my opinion about the religion, which I don't like, right? Just like the Quran itself, you know, criticizes non-Muslims and calls them deaf, dumb, and blind, and worse than cattle, and you know, food for the fire, and the filth, spiritual filth, supposedly, and don't let them approach the mosque after this day, and this and that. You know, so if what I'm saying is considered hate, then what the Quran is saying is considered hate. And I don't even go as far as to criticize Muslims. I criticize the religion, whereas the Quran is actually criticizing non-Muslim individuals. So there's like you can see like there's a difference, right?
That's such a good point, huh? Whereas we're
Yeah.
critical of Islam, we're critical of an ideology, but that ideology is critical of humans, you know? So it's yeah, it's funny.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So I don't know too much about this, but as far as I've heard, I think it was overblown, over the top. And the funny thing is, you know, a lot of this kind of like overreaction is coming from the Christian right. So the same people that will happily put the kids in a Catholic school where they have prayers in the school, these same guys are protesting outside high schools saying we don't want Sharia in Canada because Muslims wanted to pray in the school. So it's such a hypocritical position where you're okay with like Christians praying in school, but you're not okay with Muslims praying in school. So like you know what I mean? Like be consistent. These are the type of guys that kind of blew up this whole motion into much more than really what it needed to be, I feel. So, and that's my opinion.
Okay. Now, what's it's a bit of a hard question for you to answer, I suppose, if you don't have stats and figures in front of you. But just from your, from your experience, what you've witnessed, what's the demographic like of Muslims within Canada? And also on top of that, what percentage of them would be wearing the niqab and hijabs or just like dressing freely? How would that break down?
Okay, so like I said, I was a big part of the Sunni Muslim community, so I can just give you like my kind of ballpark figures. As a ballpark figure, the niqab is a very small minority, maybe like 1% or something, a couple of percent points. And you know, it's all centered around what kind of mosques they go to. So the certain mosques kind of encourage the niqab, unfortunately. And in terms of hijab, It's hard to say, like a large percentage, right? Maybe 50%. I don't know, maybe 25%.
Okay.
But a large percent of Muslim women wear the hijab, and the rest, I guess, is just mixed.
Yeah. Okay, so not a lot of niqabs then floating around because over in England in certain areas, I'd say you walk down the street and within a 30-second period you might see 15, 20. I'm not being, I'm not
Oh,
exaggerating my words here. I'm being absolutely sincere. So it's pretty common over in England. You're saying that's not the case in Canada.
it's kind of okay. So, and it's kind of it's how do I say this? So, like, let's say I'm going out to the store or I'm going to the mall.
Hmm.
I'll probably see one or two people in the car, maybe.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that.
Would you be able to tell the age of these ladies? Because a common trend that's been growing in England, whereas I'd say maybe 7, 8 years ago, something like that, the general woman you see wearing the niqab would be an elder lady. And recently, you can tell by the way they walk, dress, maybe
Yeah,
their handbag,
I
something along
tell.
those lines. You can kind of guess age. And recently, I've been seeing a growth in the youth wearing the niqab as well. So, would you be able to distinguish between the two? Would you say it's the elder demographic are wearing that, or would you see a rising trend in the youth dressing
Yeah,
that way?
the young people, they're in the 20s and 30s.
Yeah. Why do you think that is?
Because see, so this is what's happening. There's a certain movement among Salafis, especially, for a resurgence of this like hardline Wahhabi slash Salafi Islam, and
That
there's a
comes out of
mosque.
Saudi Arabia, correct?
Yes, there's a mosque here known as Al Huda, which is all over the world in Pakistan, in Canada. And this Al Huda Mosque is one of the mosques where this Pakistani lady founded it. It's a women's mosque. And they actually teach that niqab is obligatory or at least highly recommended.
Wow.
So unfortunately, there's, people preaching this thing that, and some of my Muslim friends don't like that. They don't like the fact that people are preaching niqab. They think it's extreme. Many Muslims I know think it's extreme, but the Muslims that follow it, they follow it because they believe it's like the way women are supposed to dress, right? So that's why it's young people because the mosque is actually making and it's not just Al Huda, it's also Al Kautar and Al Maghrib, these two institutions where they go, they travel around. They don't have one central location, unlike Al Huda, which is an actual mosque that they established. Al Qaeda and Al Maghrib, the two Salafi institutions where they don't have one central location, but they'll have weekend seminars at a university where they'll like preach this Salafi version of Islam, where they don't necessarily go into whether niqab you should wear niqab or not, but the setting the stage for people to wear niqab and to become more hardline, not listen to music, all that stuff, like I was basically.
Who do you think's funding this movement?
Okay, so I think it's self-funded. I don't think it's funded. I don't personally think it's funded from Saudi Arabia. Al Maghrib was an innovative kind of institution that this guy Muhammad Al Sharif made, and he's a guy that was born in, I don't know if he's born in Canada or he came to Canada when he was very young in the Edmonton area. He grew up here. He's as Canadian as you can get, but he wanted to bring, and then he went to Saudi to study in Medina. And then when he came back, instead of doing the typical work at the mosque gig, he decided he wanted to change the world. And he studies like MLM, multi-level marketing, and he studies like psychology, and he learns from these other guys, right?
Yeah.
And so what he's done is he's taken this model and he's built this new model of Islamic teaching, which appeals to young people, university style, 2 weekend seminars, so it doesn't affect your life in any way. You can still go to school and work and whatever. And this actually had a huge impact on the community. And then Al Kautar which was founded by this guy Chaudhry in Australia or New Zealand, I think Australia. He actually copied Al Maghrib, and so he started the second institute, which is Al Kautar. So it's self-funded. You pay like $100 a weekend, and because of this, these guys actually have jobs now. A lot of these sheikhs actually work for these institutions, and they actually get paid quite well to teach these seminars because one seminar you pay like $80 one weekend, $150 or so for 2 weekends, and there's like many people that come. I think more than 1,000 people sometimes. So we're
Wow.
talking about like $80,000 for one weekend they're making. They can pay these people well. So now they've created a kind of a job market for a lot of these scholars, right? Or these students of Islam or whatever, right?
Mm, for sure. Now, another market that I assume makes an absolute fortune for a certain individual, group, charity, organization, whatever you call it, is the Hajj. Now, did you ever make the trip to Mecca?
Yes, I made the trip not for the Hajj, but for the Umrah, which is the baby Hajj. So I went, like maybe it was a couple of, maybe 5 years ago or something like that, maybe 7 years ago. We went to Saudi Arabia, we went to Medina and Mecca, and so the Umrah is something you can do anytime. You can just go whenever you like,
Okay.
and you don't do all of the rituals that you go for Hajj, but you do go around the Kaaba 7 times, and you run between the two hills, Safa and Marwa, and you have to put on the ihram, the white robe, one piece robe for the men. Women don't have to do that. And yeah, so we did that whole thing. Me and my entire family, my mom, my kids, my wife, we all went together, and then we went to Egypt for 6 months.
Wow, a long time. But just quickly, how did you go about organizing the trip to Saudi Arabia and not doing the Hajj? What's it called again?
Umrah, Umrah.
Umrah. Now, was there
Yeah.
like an Islamic travel agent who set everything up for you and organized your
Yes.
trip?
Yes. The same travel agents that give you the Hajj packages for like $10,000, the same guys they do this. So the Umrah as well was not cheap, by the way. We paid like 300 to 500 a night for the hotels.
Did you get your white gowns? Was that part and parcel of the deal?
No, you have to buy that yourself.
That's separate. Yeah, not included.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, but the it's not cheap though. Like I'm like, normally when you're traveling, you expect to pay like $100 a night, but we were paying when I calculated, I'm like, dang, this came up to like 300 to $500 a night. This is
Yes,
expensive.
for sure. And who do you think's pocketing the money? Was it just the travel agent that's taking that money?
I think everybody is involved in that game. So the travel agent, the Saudi airlines that we went on,
Yeah.
everybody's taking a cut. The hotels, which are owned by Saudis as well, and
Must
maybe
be
some of
such a money spinner for the country.
Yeah, I think it's like 5% of the GDP or something like that.
Wow, is that what it is?
I think 12 billion was the number, if I'm remembering correctly. Sorry, 8 billion from Hajj. It's about 8 billion in 2014, so it's way more now.
Wow. Okay, so when you get to the Kaaba as well, you can walk around it, and then there's
Yes.
levels above it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, is it a white structure? It looks like. Now, what's that for? Is that like, do you pay more money to get closer to the Kaaba, and if you pay less, you go around the walkway at the top? What's the whole
No,
point
no,
of
no.
that?
It's totally up to you how busy it is.
Hmm.
People that go on the top tend to be with wheelchairs and stuff. People that
Ah,
they don't want to get crushed or smushed or they don't want to be shoved around or whatever.
yeah.
When you go for Umrah, you don't have as much of a problem because you're not going in peak season.
Uh-huh.
You're just going off season, right? So you can kind of go on your own pace and you can go there. It's still kind of tough to touch the Kaaba because people like to touch it.
Yeah.
But like you can go either close or far, whatever you like. But I was gonna say one thing is you pay more if you want to be closer to the hotels closer to the Kaaba, and if you're further away, you pay less money. That's why we paid more because we were like right there. It was just like a 5 minute walk. Some people they go so far away they have to take like a taxi or something. So that's the difference.
Okay. Now, part and parcel of being a Muslim is to go do the Hajj. It's a couple of times you have to do it, yeah, in your lifetime to be considered Now, the mini journey you went on, is that part and parcel of the two trips, or do you have to go during, is it during Ramadan?
So a lot of people go for Umrah during Ramadan,
Yeah.
which is considered almost as good as doing a Hajj. The Hajj is the most important. You're supposed to do it once in your life if you can afford it. The Umrah is totally optional. But when you go for the Hajj, you end up doing the Umrah rites as well. So you end up doing both of them. But you don't have to go if you can't afford it. But if you have the money, then you're supposed to go at least once in your life. So it's a good business for Islam that people that own that country,
Mm.
despite the fact that the archaeological evidence is against the fact that the Makkah is the actual birthplace of Islam. There's some evidence that shows that the actual birthplace of Islam might have been Petra. And if Saudi is really truly, has the correct birthplace of Islam, they should be letting people study that stuff. But instead, the bulldozing, the doing the exact opposite of what you would expect them to do if this was a holy site. But
Yeah.
they're doing exactly what you would expect them to do if it's not true and this whole thing is a lie.
Well, a couple of questions off the back of that. I've actually heard this whole thing about Petra before. You've reminded me, and I think they found it's like where the original mosques were built, and they were all facing towards Petra and not towards Mecca. Am I right on
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, there's a bunch of arguments. That's one of the points the guy discovered, Dan Gibson, in his book.
Mm.
He wrote a book on it called Quranic Geography, and his name is Dan Gibson. It's worth a read. I think it's like $15. You have to buy it.
Is he
And
a
he also,
white Christian guy, grey hair?
I don't. So that's one thing I was wondering. Is he doing this because of his Christian bias? And as far as I could tell, I talked to someone that actually met him in real life. And I don't think this has anything to do with Christianity or his like Christian belief, if he's Christian even. It seems to me that his father is actually is in the same line as him. He's been studying the Near East and the Far East, and he comes from a family of geographers. So I don't think it has anything to do. I don't think that's the reason. I do believe is he's actually studying this because that's his life, like studying. He also has a book on Nabatea, and so this is kind of his field.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So what's your views then on Petra and no, in fact, forget that. Another thing you mentioned before about them destroying certain artifacts and historical places as well is the whole idea about Islam not being able to worship false idols, things along those lines. So, ISIS, whatever you want to call it, extreme Muslims are going across and they're destroying like huge historical artifacts that have, huge relevance for human history. And unfortunately, when they get their hands on it, they're blowing it up.
Yeah, yeah. ISIS does that, but also it's not only ISIS. It's just Wahhabism in general. It's the
Wow.
mentality of what you said of that was started by Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab. It wasn't started by him, but it was brought back alive by Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, who is sometimes considered the founder of Wahhabism, which is why Saudi Arabia is the way it is today, because he made a pact with the original the king of Saudi Arabia back then when they founded Saudi Arabia that he would be in charge of the religion, and in return he would help the king to get the country back by getting the religious people, by giving like a kind of religious edict to support the king or whatever, right? So they've been working together hand in hand, the religious Wahhabi Had right and the king, right? And they work together to keep the country in control, right? So yeah, the Wahhabis are against all sorts of idolatry. So a lot of my Sufi friends actually hate the Saudis for this, for destroying the artifacts. But I'm actually looking at it from a different perspective, from the perspective of like the truth about whether Muhammad was from Makkah or was he from Petra. And I'm not totally sure. I don't even bring up this point to Muslims because it's so far out that they just think you're crazy. They're not willing to listen to it, and so it's not a useful point to dialogue with. There's other points as well on the same line, like Patricia Crone talked about why Makkah is not on any spice routes. If Makkah is such an important hub, like the Islamic story goes, how come it's not on any of the spice routes, right? So there's a bunch of other arguments and sorry, evidences for the fact that maybe Muhammad was not really from Makkah because the Quran calls it the mother of cities. But if it's not even on any maps, then what kind of mother of cities? And it talks about the lush foliage and the green, and there's no lush foliage in Mecca. There's a lot in Petra. So there's a lot of kind of points in this book. The sacred city is a video version of it. If someone wants to watch a video rather than reading the book, it's again you have to rent it. I think someone uploaded it on YouTube, but it's probably going to disappear soon. So there's evidence for this, but like I don't use this point. Like honestly speaking, if someone is open-minded enough, then I'm willing to like tell them that yes, you should look into this. But I don't. It's not my go-to for sure because people they're not willing to listen when you get to that point. It's just like they're just shut down. So I don't even stir from that.
Yeah, for sure. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, that Petra had a really advanced irrigation system and they had crazy flowers and growth, all because they mastered how to distribute water throughout their land. Is that, am I right in
Yeah,
that?
yeah, I don't no, I don't know too much about it, but I do know that some of the descriptions of the Quran about Mecca, and not just the Quran, but also about the Sunnah,
Mm.
including the whole thing of Safa and Marwa, the two hills that you run back and forth
They're
from.
supposed to be mountains, aren't they? They're little
Yeah,
hills.
they're not even hills anymore when you go there. You're like they've been so eroded by the human traffic
Yeah.
that they're like barely even hills. Like it's hilarious, right? But apparently in Petra, there is actually mountains, right? So like there's a bunch of points. But again, like I said, it's not my first go-to because people are not willing to listen. You can actually share points like this with someone that's kind of already left Islam because now they've opened their mind that maybe what I've been taught is not true. But Muslims, it's kind of like not worth even discussing.
Yeah, for sure. Now, I watch a lot of North American content. I'd say the majority of it's American. I don't know how many. Well, Rebel Media comes out of Canada, doesn't it? So I watch a fair bit of Canadian stuff as well. But a lot of the things I hear about America is now Canada's close to Detroit. Yeah, that's one of the states that's closest to Canada. Am I right?
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then you've got Dearborn, Michigan. That's always brought up. It's always brought up as the kind of go-to place within America that there's a huge growth of Islam. They're all dressing kind of differently, and it's you hear the skeptic being apprehensive of Dearborn. Now, are you familiar with Dearborn, Michigan, and why they do view it like that?
So I actually watched a documentary called Muhammad Legacy of a Prophet,
Mm.
maybe like 10 years ago, and they featured Dearborn, Michigan. They showed like a Muslim firefighter and this and that. I don't know too much about it, but what did you want to ask about it?
Why it's so relevant? Why it's always brought up in conversation when Americans critique Islam?
Oh, oh, yeah, no, I don't know too much about that.
All right, then. So we're not going to talk about that one much, are we? That's fair enough.
No.
Who would you prefer to lead your country, Mr. Justin Trudeau or the president across the border, Mr. Trump?
Oh my God, not Trump. I don't like Trump.
Of course not. Now, being an ex-Muslim, how have you found Trump's views on Islam and the Muslims? Have you taken offense?
Um, I don't think he's a very clever individual, and he doesn't seem to know what he's doing. He like half of the things he promised he was going to do, he didn't do. Like he said he wasn't going to get involved in the Middle East, he got involved in the Middle East. Like pretty much everything he criticized Obama for doing, he did the same thing. Like, working with the Saudis. Obama, he said, took too much vacation. Now he's taking even more vacation. Like he's on like 50 plus days now,
Mm.
whereas Obama was like 17 or something. And he was saying, when I'm president, I'm not going to take that much vacation because I have a lot of work to do, and there's so much to be done. And now he's like already like triple the amount of vacation that Obama took. So, and then the whole, killing Obamacare. I'm someone that, believes in, you know, if people are not doing well, and we should still help them, even if we have to kind of give a bit. So, in a sense, I like Canada's values in terms of like, public health and stuff like that. It seems to work well for me. And so I feel bad for people that don't have healthcare, people that don't have insurance. I've seen the bills that come out of the US, some of those medical bills, and it's insane, right? Like people have to sell their house if they don't have insurance, and the whole life is ruined because of one medical, emergency that happens in their life, right? They get cancer or something. So I kind of like the idea of social welfare, of a social net, of taking care of people that may need our help, that are less well off. Of course, my opinions can change. I'm not like hard on one side or the other, but I do tend to be a little bit more lefty. But as time goes by, I'm maybe inclining a little bit more to the right. I'm not sure exactly. It's a learning process for me. I'm still studying these things.
Tell me about it, my friend. We talk about learning process and also fluidity of thought as well, and having the ability to change your mind and change your opinions. I think that's important, and that's what's going on in my life as well. I'm by no means putting my flag in the ground and defending it with my life with that position, because, as I say, if I come across some information or come across someone who puts forward a very valid argument and change my opinions, I'm more than happy to do that. I think it's a very ignorant and arrogant individual who's never going to change his opinion depending on what information is presented to him. So you and I are on the same page on that one. Now, look, with me researching Islam and getting into it a little bit, one thing I came across is that, I was slightly apprehensive that if Muslims would hear my critique, that they would, jump into a car, get whatever weapons they can, and, come bash me up. Now, what I've really found is that instead they want to argue their point. They want to debate. Now, have you engaged in many debates with Muslims about your views on Islam?
So that's an interesting question. I have been okay. So in the beginning, I was just doing the online. Like I kept discussing the same things over and over again, and then my wife told me, "Why don't you make a blog?" So I'm like, nah, I don't want to make a blog. But finally, I realized, hey, she's right. Like, I just keep discussing the same thing over and over and over again, and I'm tired of it. So let me make a blog. I made a blog, and then anyone that asked me, I would say, well, just check my blog because I have all my points on there. And people kept telling me they wanted to meet me, like individual Muslims, and everybody thought they're going to be the one that converts me back. Like, it's so frustrating, right? And what I found was when I told people, well, read my blog first, and then we'll meet, and they would be like, no, I don't want to, and I'm like, what do you mean you don't want to? Then why are you even meeting me? Like, don't you want to see my points first? Like, at least read the points, understand them, and then we can have a discussion if you disagree, right? Like because you see, people don't realize that these things, they take a lot of time, and it's not like I just jumped into atheism, overnight. I thought about these things, right? And I've reflected and discussed. And so if you want to have a good discussion, you need to understand the other person's position first, right? So I made the blog, and I told people, well, like, look at the blog, try to understand the points. And what I found is, for the most part, some people are willing to do that, but the majority are not. They just want to sit down with you and discuss, and they don't want to, they don't really care. So what I ask people is, are you, when we're discussing, I say, if I give you evidence that Islam is false, are you willing to leave Islam? And if they say no, then I'll say, okay, well, then you're a presuppositionalist. You basically are accepting the religion without any, like, you're not willing to change your position even if evidence comes to you. So then why are you discussing with me? Are you only discussing because you want to convince me? If that's the case, this is a waste of time, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, if you come into a discussion already deciding that you're not going to change your position no matter what, I'm willing to change my position. If you show me that Islam is true and every single one of my points is false, I'll become Muslim again. I have no problem with that, right? But in the reality is that most people are not interested. They just want to convince you. The few people that are interested, we do have discussions. I had like a 5 hour discussion with one guy when I was still in the middle, and he was someone, excuse me, that also almost left Islam, but he decided to become Muslim again. He basically used Pascal's wager. He said, it's too much of a risk. I don't want to go to hell just in case I'm wrong, so I'm just going to be Muslim. And I'm like,
But this whole idea of not wanting to go ahead if you're wrong. What if you're practicing the wrong religion? Huh? That's the deal as well. What if you're praying to the wrong God, all that kind of stuff? Maybe it's the Christian way of praying, or the Judaism one. Like, how do you know which is the right one? So if that's your argument, then it's flawed because you're still taking a gamble.
yeah, you're still taking a gamble, and on top of it, um, yeah, like in his opinion, he was a born Muslim. Islam is the only possible true religion. That's how he sees it.
Yeah.
There's no other possible true religion. All the other ones are false. So he thinks either Islam or nothing. But my point is, Islam still comes with a cost, like a cost to every thought you make, every decision you make. Everything in your life is based on this religion. So don't just say I don't know and I'm just going to do just in case. And plus, what type of God would accept that I'm going to believe in you just in case? Like, what kind of belief is that? Like, it's useless. Yeah. And so Pascal's wager has been debunked 1,000 times already. And so I felt kind of sad that this individual was like, I don't want to be pulled down into this again, so I don't want to discuss with you. But he did help me in the fact that I thought maybe I'll become Muslim after talking to this guy. But then when he came down to Pascal's wager, I'm like, no, this is not convincing enough for me. That I'm not going to become Muslim just because of Pascal's wager. I want real evidence. The Quran's the word of God. And when I first started, it was poking holes in Islam. But then as time went by, I realized you don't need to poke holes in Islam. You don't need to do that. Ask them in the first place, why should I believe this is the word of God? Let them explain to you. Put the burden of proof on the believer. Because by default, Muhammad was a liar, or he made it up, or he was crazy. If someone comes to you and says, I spoke to God, you'd be like, okay, can you please prove that to me? You wouldn't just accept what the guy said, because by default, we don't see these things happening. So the burden of proof is on the one making the claim. If I told you there's a truth fairy, you can't tell me, oh, you prove there's no tooth fairies. Like, I mean, sorry, I can't tell you that. Oh, you prove there's no tooth fairies. You can't do that because then the world wouldn't make sense. People can't just make claims and then tell you that you have to disprove them.
For
The
sure.
person making the claim needs to bring the evidence. Right? That's called the burden of proof in philosophy, right? So I think the problem with many ex-Muslims is they don't understand this idea, so they're not able to kind of convey that the burden of proof is on the person making the claim. And what happens is they'll just poke holes in Islam. They'll say, well, Muhammad allowed sex slavery, or Muhammad allowed, this and that, right? Like owning people, or beating your wife, or whatever it is. And then, the Muslims will come back and say, well, I have an answer for that. At the time, slavery was blah, 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 blah. And they'll come up with some sort of apologetics, and they'll say, there, see, now you need to accept Islam again. And then the ex-Muslim or the person having doubts will say, but no, I also have a problem with this. And they'll say, see, you don't want to believe. You just want to make excuses. No matter what I tell you, you just come up with something else. Because the person who is doing this, they have multiple issues with Islam, and it's not enough for them because the burden of proof in their mind hasn't been accepted, but they don't know how to verbalize that. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm. Yeah.
So yeah, so people, in terms of debates, actual debates, I had one guy, his name is Ali Dawa. I got into a discussion with him online. He has over 100,000 followers, so he's kind of like an online popular YouTuber.
I'm aware of who he
And
is.
in UK.
Yeah.
Oh, you're aware who he is?
Yeah, I
Okay, you
know
know
who
who
he
he is?
is.
Okay. So he challenged me to a debate online because I got into a discussion with him where he was calling everyone fake ex-Muslim. Oh, you're a fake ex-Muslim. You never knew Islam, so you're a fake
Yeah,
ex-Muslim.
and if you're a Muslim woman, don't you dare wear makeup as well.
Exactly. So he goes around publicly attacking women and doing these things. And so I jumped into a conversation on Twitter. I'm like, oh yeah, am I a fake ex-Muslim too? And then he's like, depends. And then I was like, I explained to him my history. And then he's like, okay, I challenge you to a debate. I'm like,
See,
I don't
that's
want
the
to.
thing. They love it so much, don't they? I challenge you to a debate, not a duel, a debate.
Yeah. And then he's like, I'll even pay for you to come to UK. We'll come down to Speaker's Corner. Me and my boys will have a discussion with you. I'm like, come on, man. Like, we live in the age of internet. I'm like,
Yeah, there's
read
no
my
need for me to
blog.
get on a plane and come over to Speaker's Corner.
Yeah.
That's a little bit excessive.
I'm like, come on, read my blog, make a response, make a comment, whatever you like. All my points are right there. But he didn't want to. He kept saying no, 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 right?
Mm.
So then he tried to publicly humiliate me. He's like, I'm gonna expose you. You're a coward. You're a fake. You don't want to debate me. This and that. So finally, I got so pissed off. I'm like, okay, fine. You know what? Screw this. I'm not confident about this, but I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do my first ever debate, right? Then, like less than a week later, he blocked me and he said, I'm not going to debate you because you just want attention. He basically said, oh, you're posting that you're going to have a discussion with me. I'm pretty sure what happened was somebody messaged him and told him this guy is not just a typical guy that doesn't know anything. He's actually studied this stuff. Or he actually looked at my content
Yeah, I
and he
thought,
realized that this guy is not going to be an easy person to kind of just like debunk,
yeah.
right? So he ended up blocking me after making such a big show of it. But lucky for me, I managed to grab all the screenshots of all the things he said, and I made a video of that, like a small video, and I put it on my blog as well. Ali Dawa challenges Abdullah Samir, and so that was the end of it. He unfortunately chickened out, and
Wow. So he kept
I
calling you, calling you, calling you. You called his bluff and he ran a mile.
yeah, he ran away at the end of it. So I was kind of disappointed because I pumped myself up to do it. I didn't want to do it because honestly speaking, I was scared. I've never done a debate before. And debates are not just about Islamic knowledge. They're about, being showmanship
Hmm.
and being able to kind of, make the crowd come on your side and, change the topic. There's many techniques in debating. It's not just about who's the smartest or who has the best arguments, but it's about how you present
Oh, for
yourself.
sure. And the best one is what they love doing as well. It's like, let me talk, let me talk. And someone kind of like starts talking over them, be like, bye bye, and let me talk. And it's just like straight
Yeah.
away, it's like 1 point to me, 1 point to me. Now, it's funny you say that. I was down at Speaker's Corner maybe like 6 weeks ago or something to listen to
Yeah.
Muslims debate non Muslims about Islam and yada, yada, yada. And there was this one guy debating an atheist about the existence of God. And his argument was trying to boil it down to such minutia that you would say to him, I can kind of understand where you're coming from with that. And your response with that saying, I can kind of understand, it's like, bang, you see, God exists. And it's like, no, 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 no. You've made such a kind of like strange argument that I can kind of see where you're coming from. And just the fact you give him a little glimpse of, to say, yeah, I kind of agree with what you're saying, straight away, it's like, yeah, see, God exists. It's like, no, it doesn't. And
Yeah.
I'm a bit like you. I'm not going to engage them in debate as well because at the end of the day, I'm an atheist. So what's the point someone kind of to debate me about the existence of God? I just don't believe it. I've studied culture. At university, one of the things I did was called ritual and religion, and we were talking about sun dance and rain dances, and the necessity of why they're actually there. So, my atheism hasn't just come from a belief as well. I've studied I've studied
Right.
religion, I've studied culture, and I understand the need for religion within society. So yeah, I just don't see the point of engaging in debate with someone who wants to tell me about the existence of a man sitting on a cloud, where I'm just thinking, yeah, no, I'm sorry, he's not there. So
Yeah,
what's the
and
point, huh?
even and so I was convinced that debates are useless as well, but after that whole Ali Dawah
It
debacle,
empowered you, huh? You felt a little bit strong.
yeah, exactly. Now I'm actually looking for a debate, and I actually made an open kind of invitation. I don't want to
Open
say challenge.
challenge.
Yeah, open invitation to anyone that wants to debate about Islam. And I said publicly on my blog and whatever, like I'll debate anyone that wants to have a discussion, or not even a debate, even a friendly discussion on Islam. You tell me why you believe, I'll tell you why I don't believe. I'll publish it on my channel, so you'll get to access all of the people that are kind of having out slash ex-Muslims slash subscribers. I'm giving you a platform. I'm giving you my platform, so you don't have to worry about exposing my bad ideas on your platform. Like, I'll do it on my platform, right? But what I found is nobody wants to debate with me. People are now, I've got some sort of like image now. I'm infamous basically, right? And so people have heard of Abdullah Samir and they're like, oh, I don't want to discuss with this guy. And so I'm kind of disappointed because honestly speaking, I want to have this discussion. It's just like I'm having this discussion with you. I feel like, having a discussion with a Muslim and showing where the problems are in his thinking process can be very helpful to other people who think the same way. Over just me, just talking on my own, right? So I would like to. There was another guy who challenged me to debate as well. Oh my God, it's so funny. If you check my YouTube channel, his name is Natmatullah Ichtami. His name is kind of hard to pronounce,
Mm.
but if you see the what he did, he was like, "Atheists are so dumb. You are so stupid." And then he's like, "I'm gonna debate this guy." I told the guy I'm gonna debate you, and then when I said, "Okay, fine, let's do it," and this time I was more careful because of what happened with Ali Dawah. I'm like, I'm gonna be more careful not to piss him off. I'm not gonna like scare him away with my comments. And I didn't even answer any of his comments. I just said, let's have this call. Let's do a call. And he refused.
Mm.
And then finally I decided, okay, I'm going to make a video, responding to his points one by one instead of having a discussion because he doesn't want to have a discussion with me. So unfortunately, I do believe, like, I was listening to a podcast with Sam Harris and Lawrence Krauss,
Yeah.
and he said that,
Hold on there, 1 second. Those you can't get two more intellectual humans, really, huh? He said Sam Harris, like, fair enough, that bloke really knows his stuff, and he said Lawrence Krauss is like, my God, this is gonna blow your brain with the amount of intelligence coming through your headphones.
yeah. So there was a discussion with them on the podcast, and he explained why he does debates and why he used to think they were useless as well, but he said that it brings your message to a part of the community that hasn't heard it before. So like when he did it, he was in a church and he got a whole bunch of Christians, were able to hear his arguments, and he even did it with a Muslim guy, Hamza Sotis, right? And so, there's a big audience that gets to hear the other side of the story that they've never heard before. And these guys, they won't go and listen to like videos of Abdullah Samir, but a debate, they will listen. So, there's a big chunk of the community that's willing to listen to debates, and I can't reach those people until somebody discusses with me, right? You know what I'm saying? So I'm kind of disappointed about that. But one more thing I wanted to mention about what you said, and we gotta end it in the next 10 minutes.
No, it's fine. I was
Uh,
gonna. I've got one more question for you, my friend. We're good.
okay, good. So I have one thing I want to say as well. The problem with these debates as well is I had a guy, his name is Faz, on my Facebook, who found me online, and he was begging me for a debate over and over and over again over the last 2 years. And he's been saying, I want to debate you. I want to debate you. Come on camera. Why are you checking on me? Why are you scared of me? Right? And it's just some guy in the community. He's not even like known or anything, right?
Mhm.
And finally, I told him, okay, fine. I'm going to debate you because everyone one by one was challenging me and kind of running away. And then guess what he said? He said, I'm only going to debate you about whether God exists. That's it.
Perimeters of the debate. Yeah, I'm comfortable in this environment, but if you take me there, then I might drown and you might kick my ass. So let's just talk about this one little thing that I'm good at talking about.
Exactly. He said, I'm only going to talk about. I said, but I don't care if God exists or doesn't exist. I care, is Islam true? Many of my ex-Muslim friends still believe in God. Why does it matter if God exists? I'm still going to live my life the same way whether God exists or doesn't exist. What matters is, did he send a revelation? Right or wrong? And he's like, no, but you don't believe in God. So what's the point of debating if Islam is true? Because you don't believe in God. I'm like, okay, we can discuss it. I can explain to you why I don't think God exists. You can tell me why you think God exists, which is, ontological argument, kalam cosmological argument, argument from absolute morality, or the moral argument. This is his point. He's basically a fan of William Lane Craig. He's just going to repeat all the same stuff that William Lane Craig says. But I don't care. I want to know, is Islam true? And of course, he didn't agree. Right? He didn't agree to do that. So I'm like, well, I guess then I can't debate you, because I don't want to discuss whether God exists. I want to discuss, is Islam true? So that's the thing, right? That's the reason why I think when you go to Speaker's Corner, they'll jump on the God topic, because it's kind of ambiguous. You can kind of argue either way, and people don't really understand the philosophical arguments and the responses and counters to them.
For
And
sure.
I'm not a philosopher either, so I don't understand them that well either, right? So what I'm saying? It's kind of like a ridiculous thing to do.
I totally agree. They boil the God argument down to like energy. And his energy, it's just crazy. And as I said, just whatever. They go to such a micro level that it's just like, haha, see, whatever. I've put that point forward
Yeah,
before, but it's a little
it's
bit.
not even that. It's just a philosophical argument about whether there's some sort of primordial being. But the problem is, even if you prove there's a primordial being, it doesn't make Islam true. It doesn't mean there's one God. It
And it
doesn't
also
mean there's
means that
Allah.
primordial being, does he have any relevance to your scriptures whatsoever?
Yeah, does he even have a personality?
Yeah,
Maybe
exactly.
he doesn't have a personality. Like that. Like there's so many assumptions they make to jump from deism to theism that it's just a pointless discussion, right? So that's kind of like where I'm coming from, and that's the thing. Yeah.
Cool. Abdullah, you said before you were inviting people onto your platform. Where is your platform? Where can people find it?
Yeah, so it's abdullahsameer.com, abdullahsameer.com,
You've done that
or
before,
I'm on,
haven't you?
yeah, or youtube.com/Abdullah Adam. That's my YouTube channel. And I'm hoping, I've heard some bad news from fellow atheist YouTubers that YouTube is kind of anything they consider controversial, they're kind of clamping down on, and that includes atheist channels, or, channels.
Atheism's controversial, yeah?
Yeah, apparently it is, so many of the videos are getting demonetized. Some of the people I know, the videos were demonetized.
Yeah.
And I don't have an issue with that, because it's not monetized anyways. I'm doing this for free of charge, and I don't plan to make any money off this. My whole point is I want to reach the community. I want the message to go loud and clear.
Yeah.
I have my own job, I have my own life. I don't need money from this, and I'm happy to spread the message as far and wide as I can, that this is not true, and I want people to know that. But people that actually their living is connected to this are being hurt by the clampdown. So I'm a little bit wary about YouTube as well now. I don't know what's going to happen. Maybe one day my entire channel will just get disconnected. So I do keep a copy of my videos in case that ever happens. I can just really upload them somewhere else.
Yeah,
You know.
savvy move, for sure. And what's the best social media for people to follow you on? I know you're on Twitter. Do you use Facebook? Anything else?
Yeah, I'm also on Facebook as Abdullah Samir. So if you just search me up, and it's all, I think the main place is the blog. It's connected to everything. But yeah, thank you so much.
Hey, no worries. Thank you. I really enjoyed this one as well. It was great. It was great for me to sit back, listen, and you provided some really informed statements. So yeah, thank you very much for your time today. And you can crack on with your day. Huh? You just started your day. Whereas over here it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm gonna go upstairs, edit it, and hopefully get it out within a few hours.
Perfect. Once you have it, I'm going to share it on my on all my media as well. So looking forward to that. Thank you so much for a wonderful discussion. Let's do this again sometime, and maybe we can go into more specifics about maybe Islamic doctrine or certain things rather than like my story. I think that would be fun.
Yeah, beautiful. I think maybe next time we do that, then we'll have a little talk beforehand, maybe set out some guidelines, some perimeters as to what we're going to discuss. We can both do some research into the subject and have a nice informed chat.
Yeah, totally.
Sounds
And
awesome, mate.
one more last question. What do you go by? What name do you go by?
Ben.
Ben. Okay, Ben. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know. I'm really rude at introducing myself. Yeah, I was saying this before. It's not intentional. I'm not trying to like hide who I am as a person. I'm just really rude. So yeah, my apologies, my man. My name's Ben. But
No
anyways, we
problem.
do things back to front here. Look, you crack on. You have a good day, and we'll stay in touch.
Okay, take care.